Good morning. We begin our today's lecture on realism. So, realism as an artistic device has its roots in the writings of French writers such as Balzac, Honoré de Balzac, Flaubert, Gustave Flaubert and Émile Zola. Of course, they are also related, they are also associated with the concept of naturalism. So, realism and naturalism are two concepts which people usually use interchangeably, but they are not always so, and perhaps one of these days I will discuss in detail some movie which is more naturalistic and less realistic. So, that is one aspect. Realism is generally understood as an illusion when we talk about film studies, as an illusion that what is shown on a screen is connected to reality. Okay. We are watching something which is very, very real, okay, true. So, people have often argued what is recognizable and what is real. Is there a difference between, or can they be used interchangeably? Is everything that is recognizable real and vice versa? So, realism is a mix of devices to which filmmakers use to disguise the fact that after all whatever we are watching is not real. There is lot of controversy about realism and so how realistic can you be, that is the idea. Now, naturalism as a concept is based on Darwin's idea about nature, that is natural conditions play a significant role in the shaping of the individual's mind and character. Realism, however, derives its ideology from Marxist theories of economics, that is, economic conditions of a person play a significant role in the conditioning of his or her mind and character. Remember, both these concepts have an element of fatalism. For example, you read Tess and Flaubert's Madame Bovary in order to understand the subtle distinctions between these concepts better. Yeah. Now, you just watched a clipping from Sidney Lumet's Dog Day Afternoon, a 1973 film based on a real life heist. What are the indications that this could be a realistic movie? It is usually regarded as a realistic movie, not just because it portrays something which actually happened, but what were the signs, what were the semiotics you have already done, the codes, the signs, the symbols which tell you that it is very real.
The initial montage about the everyday activities of the people of the city.
Okay, so the initial montage about the people of Brooklyn, and what kind of people are those? Working class. That is what we understand Brooklyn is. Yeah? It is a predominantly not very affluent place. People are working class, low middle class, who struggle with their day to day lives. What else? What
nervousness shown by
oh, we will come to that later. I am just talking about the first 5 minutes, the credit sequence.
It's very slow and every day. We're not told that anything drastic is going to happen.
Okay, so we are never given any kind of indication, good Vijay, that anything drastic is going to happen today, anything startling is going to happen today. It's an everyday, it's a regular average day in the life of an average New Yorker or a person from Brooklyn. Okay, that's the idea. There is trash somewhere, there are beggars somewhere, homeless people. So, Sidney Lumet is very attentive to details, to everyday details. This was just an everyday, this was just a regular day, okay, and then something like this happened. But while doing that, while showing us that this was just a regular normal day, he shows us certain details of Brooklyn which are extremely realistic, which if you go to that part of New York, you will find that it is indeed true even today. Okay. So, that is the idea, to show reality. And how does he achieve that kind of realism? Now, I am asking you a more technical question. When Sidney Lumet shows that Brooklyn is after all not a very rich place, not a very affluent place, then he shows you certain scenes, certain shots which depict the lives of very ordinary regular people, also very poor people, that is also there. But what does he do to do that?
One thing I noticed was it looked like a footage, like a video footage. The quality of the shots had the natural lighting and it looked more
exactly. What she is trying to say is it had a documentary feel to it. It had a documentary feel to it. She is also trying to tell you that it looks like the filmmaker resorted to using as much natural light as possible. So, that means it was not shot inside a studio, remember that. Okay. So, the camera people, the cinematographer, the director, they must have just gone out on the real streets and captured the lives of real people and taken shots of the real garbage. Okay. They must have glossed over certain aspects, but it looks like it was shot in a natural setting and in natural lights. So, that is one of the aspects, that is one of the devices used by those filmmakers who aspire to make realistic films, as opposed to what? As opposed to what? Realism as opposed to, when you talk about artificially constructed sets, artificial lights to make people look prettier than they are, to make sets look prettier than places look prettier than they really are. So, there was a time when New York would be constructed, MGM was known for that, MGM studio, are you aware of that? So, there was a point when MGM was a city in itself and they had replicas, miniature replicas of all the famous monuments and landmarks of New York. They do not want to go outside and trouble their beautiful actors and female actors to get exposed to real people and real lights. So, whatever was done done inside the set, on the sets, inside the studio. Okay. This tendency to be as realistic as possible started during the late 50s, caught on during the 60s, especially with Bonnie and Clyde. If you are aware of the movie, please watch it, note down the name, Bonnie and Clyde. And then the so called Hollywood new wave cinema, Easy Rider is one. And then we had cinema of those new wave American authors, Martin Scorsese, Mean Streets, Taxi Driver. We had Sidney Lumet, of course, and then we also had Coppola, who actually was audacious enough to go all the way on location and shoot his Apocalypse Now, right. Woody Allen also tried to do as much shooting outside on real locations as opposed to creating a replica of the house. So, this is one way in which filmmakers try to attain realism. We will be talking about realism as a theory as we go on. Key theoreticians of realism, and you can look at Raymond Williams' book called Key Concepts, and he gives plenty of description of what is realism. So, it is a very good way to begin understanding. It is not like the definitive book, but he It's like a dictionary of terms, key concepts. So, please take a look at Raymond Williams' key concepts. Rudolf Arnheim, Siegfried Treco, and Andre Besant, who we keep on referring to in this course. Andre Besant, the French theoretician. Okay, now historical context of cinema and realism. It begins from 1839 with the invention of photography. 1877 we had the invention of phonograph, and between 1889 and 1895 the Lumiere brothers initiated their cinema project. So, you can look these names up and see what is their contribution towards the growth of cinema. They are the pioneers, of course, but you should understand what they did. And the idea was that with so much innovation in technology and development in photography, camera would be able to capture an objective truth about the world. There is a difference between subjectivity and objectivity. So, the intention was, or the ambition was, to capture the objective truth. A realist film at least desires or aims to present what appears on the screen as real and as natural. So, one of the earliest efforts in this direction was the Lumiere's short called Workers Leaving the Lumiere Factory, and I quote one of the brothers who said, "The purpose of cinema is to capture life on the run, life as it moves, therefore, workers leaving the factory." So, workers leaving the factory, real people on real location and captured in real lights, in real time. So, they were not asked to put on some extra makeup or wear some pretty clothes. They were captured as they were, capturing the objective truth. Now, I will take a leap from, because in between cinema went through several stages and we have already referred to some, the MGM studio system, where everything was monumental. The idea was not to not really, they did not aspire to be realistic, but aspire to be grand. Grandeur was the operative word there. Make things as big, as impressive as possible. And then after several stages, counterculture cinema, realistic cinema, we came to a spot where things started happening and people thought that why not capture life as it is, life on the run, going back to what the Lumiere advised us to do. So, Andy Warhol, one of the other day someone was mentioning Andy Warhol. So, he made a couple of shorts and one was called Sleep, where his friend John Giorno was captured on camera in long takes, sleeping for 5 hours and 20 minutes. And if you go to the net, you will actually find clippings from the movie. It is a nicely done film and it is experimental. It was called an anti-film. Now, why would you call such a film an anti-film? My question to you. A man is sleeping, okay, for 5 hours and 20 minutes and the camera rests on him and whatever he is doing while he is sleeping. No one told him, no one tells you what to do when you sleep. Okay, so you are captured as you are, the objective truth. But it was called, people called it an anti-film. What do you think could be an anti-film? Think about it.
Motion.
Progress.
There is no plot.
Okay, there is no plot. Okay, there is no plot. No entertainment. After all, we go to movies to get entertained. Yeah, that's the truth cannot be challenged. What else? No, he moved while sleeping, so there was some motion. Okay.
Perhaps the prevail.
Progress in the storyline.
There is no progress. Maybe if you look at the concept of progress and interpret it threadbare, then you can even say that well, from start to finish, yeah, the man slept for 5 hours and then he woke up. There is a plot, there is a progression. You see, something was happening.
Subverted the idea of film at 1963.
Exactly, narrative, you know, challenging the concept of narrative. And think of what we have done in this class while we were discussing the concept of narrative. It challenged or subverted everything that a narrative should be, and why not. And again, here's another shot, Empire. Are you aware of that? Are you aware of Empire? Watch Empire, look it up. Andy Warhol's Empire. What is it about? Empire State Building, a single shot of the famous Empire State Building from early evening one day till 3 a.m. next morning. Okay, and what was happening there? What change could have happened? Light, natural light, a real monument captured in natural light. So, if you look it up, you will find the Empire State Building in all its glory captured through various lights, all natural lights, dim lights, bright lights, etc., but single shot. Okay. What was he trying to do? Try to be as objective as possible. How real can you get? That is the idea. Okay. So, pushing the limits of reality and then telling us how monotonous reality could be. Okay. So, I refer again to Andre Besant's ontology of the photographic image, his essay from What is Cinema 1952, and according to Besant, photography does not create eternity as art does. It embalms time, rescuing it simply from its proper corruption. So, in other words, Besant is telling us that photography has a historical purpose in capturing a view of the world forever. It embalms a moment, it freezes a moment. In the essay, he also compares photography with painting, and according to him, photography and especially cinema is much more important as an art in capturing reality than painting, for a variety of reasons, and it is a controversial idea because purists would always dispute that. Okay, painting captures reality, many would argue, but this is what Besant felt, that photography and the cinema are discoveries that satisfy once and for all, and in its very essence are obsession with realism as compared to painting. Because in painting, you know, there is another hand that is at work. Cinema, although it is a collaborative art, when you watch a movie, you do not feel the intervention of an outsider's hand. So, again continuing with Besant, Besant feels that the film is a powerful medium with technical process of production, which allows it to represent an object rather than replace it, which painting does according to him, and ensures a sense of being true to life, and the word for being true to life is verisimilitude. Okay. So, cinema according to Besant is an art that comes closest to capturing realism or verisimilitude. Okay. Various cinematic movements which claim to be as realistic as possible. So, most important is it, and the earliest is Italian neorealism. Give me some examples.
Bicycle thieves.
Good. Bicycle Thieves by Da Sica. We will be looking at these filmmakers, we will be discussing these films as we go on with the course. So, Italian neorealism. There is the French pioneer as far as realism is concerned, Jean Renoir. Jean Renoir happens to be the son of the painter Renoir. Okay, therefore, there is that painting, the painterly quality in his cinema. Okay, watch it. And do you know that? Do you know anything about the famous disciple of Jean Renoir? Not the painter, but the son. There was a disciple, there was someone who learnt realism from Renoir, a very famous person who you should know about, Satyajit Ray. When Renoir was in India shooting a movie called The River, okay, Satyajit Ray was one of his associates in India, and it was because of Renoir's influence largely that Ray got interested in poetic realism. Therefore, in spite of all the allegations about Ray showing gross poverty, actually it is a poetic poverty, poetic realism. Okay. So, there is a difference between realism also, there are various kinds of realisms, okay, that we will look at, but this was poetic realism, realistic but poetically shown, aesthetically captured. We also had the politically motivated films of cinema verite. The name itself suggests verite, true, real, yeah, cinema verite, associated with documentaries in France. And then of course, there was a spate of the so called new wave cinema. So, we have the Hollywood new wave, we have the French new wave as associated with the works of Godard and Truffaut, largely Chabrol and Resnais, but we will be looking at those makers as well. New wave British cinema, extremely important, and then new wave in India, the so called parallel cinema in India, especially in Hindi cinema. There was a particular period when cinema, there existed a kind of parallel cinema. Of course, we today also we have a version of parallel cinema, but they are more mainstream. Okay. Today we have a big star like Ranbir Kapoor willing to act in a so called realistic film, right, but there was a time when parallel cinema had its own exclusive niche with its own exclusive directors and actors. There was no crossover there, today there is a crossover, that is the difference.